Mike are going to be presenting on the rules of court and do's and don'ts for virtual questioning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Mike, we have Mike involved because Mike is a partner of mine and I think has done, at last count, 10 to 12 of these types of questioning. My role in the next few minutes is to review some of the rules of court in relation to the virtual questioning, understanding, of course, the protocol has dealt with all of the technical stuff. Protocol is great. So I wanted to start with rules 6.15 through to 6.17. And this touches a little bit, I think, on a question that Basil raised in relation to the notice of appointment. So virtual questioning, when you've got cooperative opposing counsel, is great. And you just follow the normal situation of agreeing to the questioning and how it's going to take place. But what if you've got a situation where you've got a difficult opposing counsel or a difficult opposing client, and you actually have to force them into the questioning? And so it's still possible under 6.15 to serve an appointment. And if I could take direct your attention to 6.16, that sets out what should be in the notice of appointment. And this is something that I think Basil touched upon with his questioning. If you're serving a notice of appointment, you have to indicate the place of appointment. If you've got a reluctant opposing counsel or reluctant opposing witness or party, you can't really say, okay, we're going to do it at the defendant's home. The defendant isn't obligated to do that. So in relation to the appointment for questioning, the critical thing would appear to be to select the place for the questioning to take place consistent with the COVID guidelines. And that may be, I suppose, at perhaps a court reporter's office. In theory, I think you could even do it in a boardroom in your own office as long as it complies with COVID guidelines. If the person does not agree to the place of the questioning, they have the opportunity to say, no, I don't agree, and that's set out in 6.16C. So reasonable requests for the opposing party must be accommodated. So let's say the opposing party lives out in Stettler and says, well, look, I don't want to be examined in Edmonton at Weirbowen's boardroom because of public transport, and that increases my risk for COVID contamination. Those issues would have to be addressed. You would have to figure out the appropriate, reasonable place for the question to take place. And of course, if an issue arises, you can always go to court in theory, if courts are available, under 6.16(3) to have the issue determined. A question came up regarding conduct money. Obviously, with the appointment, you have to serve the normal conduct money. I think that if you have a situation where the questioning is taking place at the home of the defendant, they're still entitled to their $50 a day conduct money. Obviously, there'd be no transportation costs. So, Mike, if we can move to the next one, please. Further on to 13.1 or 13.31. So this is an interesting rule, and this involves video recording in place of transcripts. And it is possible under 13.31 for the parties or the court to order that a video recording be made instead of a transcript. Now, I'm going to stop there. I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't have both a video recording and a transcript in a situation where the parties agree or where the court orders it. The question becomes, is this something that should be considered? My understanding, and perhaps the younger people involved in in this call can tell me whether it's easily possible to record the video that's being done. But if it is, it may be something to consider. So why would you want to do that? And I think there's a few reasons. Obviously, it's better to have a situation where you can actually see and hear the witness giving their evidence rather than looking at a transcript. Well, that obviously cuts both ways. Maybe you don't want that in relation to the opposing party or to your party, but it may be that you do. Number two, it may be helpful in the context of a mediation, where you're at the mediation, and instead of the opposing party, the opposing adjuster, reading a transcript of the plaintiff's evidence, they can actually see and hear the plaintiff giving their evidence. It may be useful to doctors looking at this for an IME or DME scenario. And I understand it's rare, but there are situations where your own client's evidence, by transcript or by video, I suppose, can be placed before the court during the course of a trial if your client has passed away or if your client is otherwise unavailable to give evidence at trial. The next one, Mike, please. And this is the implied confidentiality rule that Angela touched upon in relation to the protocol. I think it's very important that we understand this rule, understand the importance of this rule, and most importantly, make sure that your client understands the importance of this rule. And emphasize to your own client, who may not be the person being subject to the questioning, who may be observing the questioning of the other party, that number one, they should not be recording it, the video or the audio. Number two, that no one else should be present in the room to watch. And most importantly, that there can be no disclosure of what took place during the questioning to anyone other than their own lawyer. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you
now. Hi, everyone. I was asked to kind of do a do's and don'ts of video conferencing questioning because, as Joe said, I've done a number of them, which I think is in the range of 10 to 12. I keep on thinking of more every time I think about it. But I first started doing video questionings in October of 2017, as far as I could tell. And I started doing that because I am a parent of several young children, and the travel requirements meant that I was either gone the night before or before the kids get up and getting home after bedtime, those types of things. And when I look back at October of 17, I think my wife was actually very ill when she was pregnant with our fourth child. So that gives you an idea of why I was doing it. And in fact, where many people are being forced to do video questionings now, when I was kind of forced to do it back then. But I had such a positive experience with it that I continued to do it up until today. So when we were talking about doing video conferencing questionings in relation to COVID, it was something that I was already comfortable with. And now that many lawyers are being forced to do video questionings if they want to keep their files open, I'm anticipating that this will be something that's much more frequently used in the future, even when we're not under the restrictions of the pandemic. And so I'm here to tell you today that for the most part, video questioning is the same as questioning in person in terms of feel, at least, and in some instances, it's even better, in my opinion. So, for example, none of you can see today that I'm wearing running shoes instead of dress shoes. So that's one of the benefits of doing a video questioning. But also, when you're talking about bringing in witnesses from other, or traveling to a witness potentially from other cities or other provinces, you save on costs. So you're not paying significant airfare to bring someone in from Toronto, my view is that you could have the witness attend at a video conferencing facility in Toronto and pay them the conduct money to do that. So, bus fare, lunch, and the witness fee, and conduct the questioning that way. So the other benefit is reduced cost in that particular scenario. So I've done office-to-office questioning where there are a few people sitting in one city and a few people sitting in the other, and I found, and I've also done it on Zoom where every single person is in a different room. I found that they work just as well, and I think in fact I would prefer using the Zoom system because of some of the that the system has. So I'll give you a few things that I thought worked well and a few considerations that you need to take into account before doing your first questioning. And we've heard this before. I think Angela touched on it, but it is extremely important to have a strong internet connection. And it's really important for the flow of the questioning. If the witness is having trouble hearing you, or if you're having trouble hearing the witness, it's going to interrupt the flow. It's also problematic if people are losing their connections and having to continually rejoin the meeting. So if you're doing a video conferencing questioning for the first time, I would suggest a test run. If you're going to do it from home and you're not sure about your internet connection, you may be able to connect with someone somewhere else to see how the conversation goes if you haven't done that already. Some of your social distancing meetings. Point number two, and I think we've heard this before as well, but based on my experience, it's very important that everyone except for the examiner and the witness are muting their audio function. And it's even helpful, as you can see today, it's even helpful for the other parties, perhaps except for opposing counsel, to turn off their video. Because when you see someone make a movement or something like that and you're looking at the screen, it can be distracting. And there is a way to solely look at the witness as well. So you can set your function that way, but just something that you should take into account. And now you might be thinking, well, if I'm sitting with my witness, if I turn off my audio function, I might not get my objection in before the witness answers. And most of the systems that you can use have a function which allow you to interrupt the proceedings or unmute your mute function just by pressing a button. So for example, with Zoom, if you hold down your space bar, it unmutes your audio system and you're able to interject, and it works very quickly. And I have found that I haven't had any issues in that respect. So even opposing counsel can have their audio muted. Point number three, turn taking, which can be odd for witnesses when they're used to everyday conversation, but the turn taking in the questioning and answering is all the more important. Because it's difficult for the examiner and the witness to pick up on verbal cues that they may observe when you're in person. So for example, you may not hear that I'm taking a breath just to interject or to ask another question, and the witness may keep on talking. And so you need to be even more aware of that in a video questioning than you would be in a live questioning. And if I could put myself into the shoes of a court reporter for a second, I suspect that it's probably even more difficult to record two people at the same time over video than it would be in person, but I'm not certain on that. Now, point number four is not necessarily a must, but I have found that it's valuable to have two screens available to me when I'm doing my questioning, because it allows me to look and have the documents available to me while I'm questioning the witness, and I may not want the witness to see them. So I have found that that's valuable. It's not a must, but it feels more like the real thing. So I do my questionings and bring my documents on a laptop anyway, but the laptop is still separate from looking at the witness, and it would be more similar to having a binder of records in front of you as well. It can be a little difficult to manage when you're trying to either pull up your Zoom screen on one half of the monitor and your documents on the other, or trying to just look at the documents without seeing the Zoom screen. So I would recommend that you try to have two screens available to you if you can. And now, point number 5 is in relation to documents. And there's a couple of different ways that you can deal with this. And now, in our in-person questionings, we're used to asking the witness to refer to a particular page or particular document. And in reality, what happens is opposing counsel grabs the document binder and flips it to them. And so here you can put the document or give the documents to the witness ahead of time, or you can screen share. And I found that screen share is, this is one of the ways that questioning over video conferencing is better, is that I can show them my second screen and I can direct them exactly to where I want to go. And it's much faster and much easier and much more effective than having the witness refer to a particular page when they're not familiar with how to navigate the documents. Now, I'm running out of time here, so I'm just flipping through to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. I would suggest that if you're doing a video cross-examination, that first of all, or questioning, I guess this applies to as well, you make sure everybody has the same version of documents. In malpractice, sometimes we have hospital production and plaintiff production, which can be different. Make sure everyone has the same if you're not planning on screen sharing. One thing to consider is that if you don't want to have the documents provided to the witness ahead of time, maybe provide them to the court reporter ahead of time so that they can be marked and sent back to you more quickly. It strikes me as much easier for the court reporter as well. I had a couple of questionings with Dan Morrow from Bennett Jones, and he agreed that I could talk with you about this. But Dan described himself as a dinosaur when it came to technology, and so I called Dan when I was preparing for this to ask him how he felt that it went. And Dan had a few weeks ago, or I guess a few months ago, refused to do a video questioning because he wanted to do an in-person instead. And I didn't have enough time to try and take the steps to serve conduct money and things like that, so we just went ahead in person. And Dan felt that the video conferencing questioning was just as good. It was seamless, was the word that he used. He also used the space bar to object and felt that that worked just as well. Even two of the witnesses were reluctant to do video conferencing questioning, and he shared with me that after the fact, they all felt that it went well, hopefully not with respect to the evidence that they gave, but at least with respect to the process. And so Dan says, if I can do it, anyone can. One last thing is that, would I have any concerns about doing a video conferencing questioning in any circumstance? And potentially there could be some things that would give me concern. The one that came to mind was if I thought that there was going to be a very difficult or very confrontational questioning, I may not do that over video conferencing depending on the circumstances, because you don't have the presence that you would in person. And so I wonder to myself whether or not there may be some loss of control or some more added difficulty with pinning the witness down. But I have done a cross-examination before because I didn't want to bring a doctor across the country from Newfoundland to do a 45-minute questioning. And that went off without a hitch, although I didn't find him to be a difficult witness. So that was just something to keep in mind. So other than that, I think this is going to impact my travel in the future, which is a bit of a shame because I just got the WestJet credit card and I won't get as many points and I might not be able to update my status. But that's the way the world is going. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks very much, Mike and Joe. We do have quite a few questions for you. The first question comes from Madan Akhar. He asks, how can we ask a witness to refer to exhibits? Should we be asking witnesses to have two screens so that they can have the record in front of them on the second screen? And perhaps maybe that's something where you'll want to deal with screen sharing.
Right. Screen sharing is the best way to do it. Learn how to do it on whatever platform that you can. And that would be especially important if the witness doesn't have the documents ahead of time. If you have something in a cross-examination that you want to surprise them with, for example, the screen sharing function is a great way to do that. I've done it both ways, where the witness is by him, or the witness in this case was by himself, and I had him refer to the pages. And so you can do it as long as they have it ahead of time. But I found it not as effective. It was more difficult to direct them to the particular line that I wanted, to make sure that we're on the same page. When you're screen sharing, you're in complete control over what everyone's looking at on the screen, which was great. Excellent.
Mark Feehan has a question about what if the person you're questioning doesn't have a computer?
So my view is that, as Joe said, I don't think that you can necessarily force someone to do a questioning in their home. But what I would do, thinking about this and talking about it with Joe, is that I would, let's just say I want to question a witness in Calgary, and I'm required to force them to do that. What I would do is I would get in touch with a court reporter in Calgary who has video conferencing capabilities, and I would serve conduct money for the witness fee, the lunch, and the bus fare for them to get to that facility. And I would have I would have paid the court reporting office to arrange for everything, including the video conferencing equipment, which, as I understand it, and as I've done in the past, most of these court reporting facilities now have that capability. When I was questioning that witness in Newfoundland that I told you about, I actually went to a court reporting office in here in Edmonton to connect with a law firm in Newfoundland. So that's how I would do it, and I'm not off the top of my head certain as to any other way other than potentially delivering them a laptop, but I don't think you'd want to do that.
Okay, so I just have a few quick questions for you about process and some nuts and bolts. In terms of the notice of appointment for questioning, Basil was wondering if it's best to outline the virtual platform that you're using on that notice of appointment. So if it's going to be via Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams, for example.
Like Joe, I very rarely have to serve notices of appointment, so I haven't actually done one for video conferencing because we're dealing with doctors and we have a good relationship with counsel, and it's very easy to make arrangements in that respect. But what I would suggest in that respect is that it wouldn't hurt to tell them what system you're going to use in case they want to object, just so everything's out in the open. I know that there have been some concerns regarding Zoom, for example, and its security, although I understand those are unfounded, or there's ways to deal with it. I'm not certain which, but I don't see why it would hurt to tell them, the questioning will take place via video conferencing using Zoom.
Yeah, I don't think that hurts, but it's not required by the rules.
Thank you. A follow-up to that point that was raised by Steve Major is if there's any preference that either of you have had because of some of these security concerns with respect to different platforms. So Zoom versus WebEx, if you feel that one is better than the other in terms of security or functionality.
I don't think Joe has done a video conferencing questioning yet. I think he's got one next week, so I think that one's for me. I have used Zoom in terms of doing video conferencing where everyone's in a different room. I have not used WebEx yet, but Mr. Morrow and I talked about that, and he indicated that it was very similar and works in a similar way, both with function and in how well it worked. The other systems that I used were office-to-office systems, so like Bennett Jones to Bennett Jones or Bennett Jones to Gowlings, and they worked just as well in terms of the communication. Although, like I say, I do prefer something like Zoom, or I understand WebEx, because I do have access to the document sharing.
Okay, thank you.
And because I can see how that would be valuable even in the instance where they have their counsel available to them, or in the same room, I should say. Sorry.
Okay, just two final questions before we move on. What do you use for a second screen if you're, say, working at home or somewhere else? Do you use a portable monitor?
No, I have a system in my office right here where I have two screens like that. And my laptop mirrors this screen here. So it's the same. So when I'm looking at my documents, I can also see the Zoom video. And then I have my documents on this screen here, which when you use the screen sharing function, then you can, I can show them what's on my second screen. And so if I just had my laptop, though, I would have the second screen and I would just be looking at the laptop and here. So you wouldn't necessarily, you don't need three screens. I recommend two.
Okay, then just last questions here. Have you found that you need more time to do questioning by video, or is it fairly similar in terms of questioning in person?
I have actually found that it's very similar. The first time I did it in 2017, I remember coming back to the office and saying it was just as good as the real thing, and there was very little difference. And even some of my colleagues who I would call more technologically advanced were a little reluctant or to believe me on that. But I don't think that it takes any more time as long as the internet connection is not causing any issues. And the understanding has been excellent each time. So, like I say, I can only think of very few instances where I would be reluctant to do it, and I plan on continuing to utilize the video conferencing system for doing questionings in the future. It works very well. I'm very happy with that. I learned how to do this many years ago. Excellent.
And just one last question from Sonia. Do we know if any court has officially declared that they're using WebEx?
In talking to Master Robertson the other day, I think that he said that the court only uses WebEx. So I don't know. I don't know if the question is, are you required to use one for questioning as opposed to another? I don't think that's the case. But I think if you're doing any court conferencing, that you would be required to use WebEx. But maybe Master Robertson can answer that question or confirm that that's the case when he gives his presentation.
Excellent.